You're listening to KFUG Community Radio News 101.1 FM and streaming on kfugradio.org. This is KFUG News with Avi Critz and Kobey Adams. Today's story reflects on the LCAP. Chances are that's an acronym you've heard before, especially if you have any connections to the school district. Whether you're a teacher or simply have children in school, you've likely heard LCAP being tossed around. It certainly means something, right? So, when we tell you that the current draft of the LCAP has just been announced in a recent school district board meeting and is well on its way to being reviewed for finalization, you may not know what that means, and really, we can't blame you. Let's back up for a moment.
We're going to dive into what the LCAP is, what the recent presentation means, and how you have the power to be involved with the upcoming finalization process, without all the usual confusion involved. Power comes from knowledge. To empower ourselves with the ability of involvement with the LCAP, in order to make it the most efficient it can possibly be, we will require a clear understanding of it. Before the school board district meeting of June 6th, we had the chance to interview Ryan Kobey of Who Schools Are Schools and Building Healthy Communities, who has been working on the LCAP for quite some time. For those interested, she has recently discussed her role on KFUG's public process, which can be found on our website and YouTube channel.
We asked Ryan to talk about the LCAP, which involved what exactly the LCAP is, how community input has been taken into account so far, and why its recent history informs the shape it's taken today. We also asked her about her own thoughts on the progression of this year's LCAP.
So first of all, it stands for the Local Control Accountability Plan. And I think a lot of times with policy, we start using acronyms and then everyone just gets so confused. So I like to not use acronyms as much as I can. And so what the Local Control Accountability Plan is, so it's the funding source for the school districts. And it's kind of California's budget system. So that's what they use to fund the district. And it's actually very new. So in 2013, the state of California changed how they did their funding. So before 2013, all decisions about how school funding would be spent were made at the state level. So they decided to give more local control to school districts. And so that's how they created the Local Control Accountability Plan. And it was really in an effort to make school funding more equitable. So to ensure that the local voices of the local communities were informing how money was spent there. And the work that we've been doing specifically focuses on something that they call supplemental and concentration funds. And that's money that goes directly to low-income, foster, homeless, and English language learners in your school district. District administrators will be presenting it this Thursday at the school board meeting, and they've presented a preliminary budget at the last school board meeting. And then when we were doing some of our community engagement sessions, they also presented some initial program proposals during that point. So that's usually the superintendent and assistant superintendent. It's really interesting because it's such kind of a localized plan, every school district gets to decide how they get their community input. So that can look different across whatever district you're at in the state. So since I've been here, I think last year the district did an online survey and they reached out to existing kind of district advisory groups. So that could be kind of your school site councils or like your PTOs or kind of a larger district advisory group. And so this year we wanted to really expand the people who they were talking to, and so we led large community engagement meetings in Smith River, in Klamath, and in Crescent City, so that people who weren't already participating in district groups and people who maybe hadn't participated in the online survey could still have a mechanism for getting their input. A topic that came up a lot last year was around access to mental health resources in the school district, and that was something that community members voiced over and over again, but wasn't incorporated that much into last year's LCAP. So we're seeing that come back and impact this year. So one of the new proposals is that the school district wants to add 2 additional counselors that have either marriage and family therapy certification or a master's in social work certification. So I think that does show a shift in understanding about so sometimes we hire counselors for the district and they're academic counselors, but that we also really need to be focusing on the social emotional. And so having those positions be for people who have those credentials is a move towards that focus on social emotional. But what we're hearing from some of the community engagement meetings is that they want more. So 2 additional counselors for the entire district, that's still a lot of work that's on a really small number of counselors. So we are seeing a call for additional counselors, as well as how the district could potentially provide more kind of informal mental health support. So it doesn't always necessarily need to come just from a counselor, because I think here, it's hard to get new service providers into the area. That's a big struggle. So how can we kind of capitalize on the people here who are already interested in this issue and doing things that you might not need like a master's in counseling to do. So like peer support groups or like yoga calm rooms, and those are some things that are already happening. So how can we support existing services that are really supporting mental health? As I talked about a little bit before, there was a big call from community members for increased access to mental health services, and also just a lack of understanding of the reasoning behind why the school district was implementing some programs. So there was a call from community members for more transparency as well. And the ACLU has been working in this community for a long time on issues more than just the LCAP. So they became involved in that point in collaboration with True North Organizing Network and the UROC Education Department, who had both been engaging community members around this issue. And so they supported both of those kind of the messages that those community-based groups were wanting to push forward, and asking the district to explain why they were directing certain funds toward things like maintenance and buildings when there was such a call for increased access to mental health services, and also an ask to, if they were going to continue funding certain programs, to explain to community members the reasoning behind those and why the programs that they were implementing were directly impacting those what we call at-risk student groups, so the low-income, foster homeless, or English language learners, and to really show those direct connections and then show data about how those programs had been effective for those student groups. So if you're implementing a program, show data that shows if it was successful, so that we know if we need to continue funding that or if we need to take a different route. So I think it was a great step over the past year having the willingness to do some of these community engagement meetings, right? The fact that that was something that didn't happen last year, so they've already gotten a more robust sample from a lot of different groups that they didn't engage last year. So I'm really happy with the willingness to go out and talk to people. And that's more opportunities for community members to have FaceTime with their district administrators, which doesn't happen all the time. So I think that's a really positive step forward. And I think we'll really get to see on Thursday about how all that work is actually being implemented. Because, we've seen the data from the community members now, and now we kind of have to put our money where our mouth is and show if we're going to actually implement and direct money towards that. I also think that moving forward with community engagement efforts, we can do more to kind of diversify our outreach even more, because we really want to start talking to the parents of the low-income, foster, homeless, and English language learners as well. And sometimes they're not always comfortable coming to a big community meeting, so how can we go to them, right? How can we make this information easy for them to engage with and make it accessible to them? Because that's really who we're trying to support with this money. There are a couple of key topics that I would really like to see how they incorporate them that came out of some of the community meetings. And there was really a call for the expansion of cultural classes and of language classes as well. So one of the proposals in the LCAP was to continue the Yurok and Tolowa language classes, and community members really supported that and said, we need more of that. We need more of that, and we want it at every school site, in addition to what other languages can be introduced into our curriculums. So there was really a call for more of that, as well as a focus on, so when the basic needs of students aren't being met, then the chances that they have to succeed academically are pretty low. So like if your base needs for food, housing, if you don't have a safe social emotional home to be in, your ability to learn is really hard. And I think that those issues impact a lot of those LCAP protected groups, because even if there are some foster students, that they've also probably experienced some of that, not having those basic necessities met, and that impacts the way that your brain develops. And so you need to take a different approach with students who have had those experiences. So how are we supporting students and getting those basic needs met? Because when we do that, we'll see our academic improvements. I would really like to make some of the LCAP outreach efforts more localized at individual school sites, and really building a relationship with the parents and the school site councils that are already there. Because I think we've been working from a higher level district perspective, but the site administrators and the school site councils know their schools, better, right? They're there most of the time, and so they have a lot more of those connections with parents. We also, at the end of this year, started doing some outreach at the after-school programs, and that was just, to me, such an amazing space for family engagement. The way that families were able to engage with those after-school program coordinators, and at those moments they had a little bit more time to engage with people than kind of the rush of just picking up from school. So being able to see the after-school spaces as a really interesting place where we could start doing some more of that level of engagement. And the after-school programs are prioritized to some of those low-income foster and homeless students. So when you're interacting with that program, you have a higher likelihood of reaching parents or family members who fall into those categories as well. Attending the school board meeting, that's really a space where you have a direct line of communication to the school board and the administrators there. So if you're hearing things that you do like, you can go and tell them what you support to really make sure that it gets implemented. And if there are things that you want to see change, that's really your moment to talk about it too. So that's really one of the additional spaces for the public to kind of get their opinions out. So the June 6th meeting is where they're presenting the draft, and then they'll be finalizing it at the June 27th meeting. But they typically have 2 school board meetings a month that are always open to the public. Their agendas are on the school district website. So if you're ever looking to comment, and there's also a public comment period during every school board meeting. So if there's any issue that comes up that you ever feel a need to talk to the school board or district administration about, that's an opportunity to do that for you that's always open.
Ryan's explanation is succinct, accurate, and helpful for understanding why the local control and accountability plan is of such importance. Having this information makes the meeting, which took place the day after her interview, June 6th, far easier to follow.
June 6th at 4:30 p.m., the public session of the district board meeting began after a closed session among the board itself. The LCAP portion would begin later on in the meeting in the form of a public hearing, where the document itself would be reviewed and after some discussion would be open to comments from the public.
The LCAP for 2019 to 2020 can be found on this meeting's agenda. If you're interested in accessing it for yourself, the way to do so thus far is to go to the Del Norte Unified School District website, access their board agendas page, and search through the list of meetings until you find the agenda that took place on June 6th. There, under the agenda item representing the LCAP portion, are the documents as a PDF. But if you're hoping to look into it, keep in mind that it is a 159-page document and can be a lot to digest at once.
This admittedly complicated method of accessing information from the LCAP sparked comments from the attendees and those who would later try to discover where they could find the draft of the LCAP, which we will get to momentarily. The board meeting's format in regards to the LCAP section of the agenda fell into 3 primary parts of key information: action items that the LCAP would cover or at least focus on, a version of their own LCAP highlights, and public reception.
Action items come into play because state law mandates the LCAP addresses 8 state priorities, 10 including county offices and education. These action items were assorted and revolved around mixed resources required for schooling. These included textbooks for students, instructional assistants, and the teacher induction program for instructional coaches.
Afterwards, highlights were provided for the LCAP, which revolved around reading directly from the LCAP and focusing on the topics as they were listed for this particular draft, similarly listed out. After much time reading off from the LCAP, the attendees of the meeting began to ask questions, and there were many questions on the LCAP and its effectiveness on community outreach.
I have a question about process.
Only 65 pages.
So when did this document get put online, that we could look at it as parents before this hearing, right?
So the document itself
Yeah,
got put on yesterday,
okay,
and then the revised document with some of the other language got put on this morning.
okay.
And again, it's a work in progress.
And when is the board voting on it?
June 27th.
But
But this is the only meeting
this is
for
the
public
only
comment, right?
public hearing.
This is
This
the
is
only
it.
public hearing. Right.
So how can you guys
I'm just gonna recommend, and I'll say it, and I'll keep saying it, you guys did a great job of doing community input this year, but this part of the process sucks. It should be separate from a board meeting. I have a little boy who's been here for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and if I would have known we're gonna go through all of this details, which is awesome, I want this, but it needs to be separate from a school board meeting.
So that might be another community meeting because the
It should be.
public meeting of the board has to happen at a school board meeting.
Okay.
And this is what we have to do at the school board meeting.
Yeah, but like being informed it online today and coming to this meeting now, I'm not ready enough to make a public comment. So this should have been up at least last week at the very latest. You know what I mean? For us to,
And I would agree.
yeah.
And this entire rewrite and this level of detail put us literally weeks behind.
And I appreciate the detail because as someone who comes from a school that does
So-
need equitable services.
So,
I need those
you
details.
said we could have a community meeting or something, correct?
before June
Where
27th?
we could learn this stuff.
Where
Well,
we
but
can-
this is the
Where we
year.
can give you some, where we can actually look at this.
But the hearing, Crystal, you have to have
The
a
hearing
public
has-
hearing for, the purpose of the hearing is really for community input, and we've done a lot of the community input, right?
Not
So,
based on,
no-
what you- I mean,
Well, the
yeah,
board
but-
members, I didn't see a lot of board members down in Klamath there.
Right.
So,
No, there was-
we're gonna give you some input today, some input today, but we really can't really give it to you. So I'd love to, the community would love to be able to look at this and get back with the board members, because we have a lot of communication. It's been tremendous with these guys. They're very responsive, your staff. I'm talking to the board members now. But we want to communicate with you guys too.
So on the 19th, there's another study session to look at the
Okay.
LCAP and budget again. So, and that's open to the public.
Okay, so the board comes to that?
Yeah, oh, no, that is the board. That's a board study session.
Oh, great, a study session.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
it's my understanding, one reason, my understanding because of the Brown Act, no more than 3 of us can go to an event unless it's agendized
Right.
for us to have discussion on.
But art, I think ours could have been there at Margaret Keating. I'm just gonna say that. There were 2 community input sessions and she wasn't at either.
Comments from the attendees reinforced this concern of the lack of accessibility for the LCAP. Afterwards, we asked for Ryan's comment on the meeting, to which he replied, "At the LCAP meeting, parents voiced concerns about the fact that the way that the district held the meeting was not really conducive to actually getting community engagement because they had it as a board agenda item, so people did not know at what time it would take place. People didn't end up getting a chance to comment on it until about 7:45 p.m., and had been there since 4:30. They also said that the fact that the district only posted the LCAP on the website the day before made it difficult for anyone to have adequate time to read over the nearly 200-page document. Comments were also made about the fact that the district needs to invest in adding additional counseling positions because, as it stands right now, they did not include any additional counseling positions despite the fact that all of the stakeholder groups acknowledged this as a priority.
After the meeting, we were also able to follow up with Superintendent Harris on his thoughts about how the LCAP reworking is going.
The community input has been incredible. I think this year we've had more explicit input from the community. We've had more opportunities for community input, and we have explicitly added community input into the LCAP. As a matter of fact, some of the community input sessions, I know you were at least one, some of the language around what parents wanted to see, for instance, we had conversations with Ryan and others after those input sessions where we talked about it wasn't about doing something new, it was about doing something better. And so we've taken that language and we've actually inserted that language into action items that direct and can drive those actions to be better. Some of those other actions too are new. So there are additional counseling services that were added because of those inputs. I think it really kind of reinvigorated our thought process as far as what should the community have access to. So there's much, much more information in this new LCAP. And how should we present what the community said? So at the end of the LCAP, we're going to be putting as much of the community input and data as we can. So that will all be there. I think for me, the most important part of this, aside from the transparency and having a more complete plan presented to the public, is next year we have to go into a planning process and develop a brand new full 3-year LCAP. So this sets the template for next year.
In short, this is the current situation of the LCAP. Parents have shown distinct displeasure in how information is given and the inaccessibility it brings by not being able to know about such crucial information in advance, and in turn has sparked worry about the effectiveness of their input. After all, how can you know what to change if you don't know what needs to be changed to begin with?
The remainder of meetings for the 2019 to 2020 LCAP are coming up quickly. On June 19th, another meeting will take place where the public can speak about their concerns and supports alike, and on June 27th, the LCAP will be finalized. It is important for the public to be heard and encourage everyone to be involved with the process of these community changes, ensuring that the most vulnerable students in our community are receiving the accommodations they deserve and that the school's budget matches up with the future we want them to experience.